So welcome everyone to our Institute of Medical Education's fourth 3 GAMSAT webinar. It's the second last of the year. I know a lot of you would have finished, well, those of you in Australia would have finished your university exams. You're probably in the mood now to finally relax, but you've probably also realized that March GAMSAT isn't far away. It's only a few months away. And some of you haven't sat the GAMSAT before. Some of you have, and you would have received your GAMSAT results finally, your September GAMSAT results. I think it's probably the longest you've had to wait for GAMSAT results since GAMSAT's inception, I think in 2004 or 5. It's been a very long time. But the good thing is you have your mark now and you've got something to work towards for your GAMSAT in March. To those of you who haven't sat the GAMSAT before, it's great that you're attending or watching. So this video will be posted online like the others. I'll give more information over the next slide. These sessions, these free sessions we offer here at the Institute of Medical Education, they're supposed to be giving you an idea of what to expect in the GAMSAT. I designed them purposefully so that anybody can attend, anybody can attend and give their opinions, because I didn't want to make something extremely hard so then you lose the crowd. I want to show candidates, from what I've noticed over the last few years with a lot of our candidates, the mistakes that a lot of candidates make in the GAMSAT and some tips and tricks you can actually use to improve your score. A lot of the students I work with and candidates I work with, one thing I notice is that you're not doing poorly in the stuff you don't know. You're falling short on the stuff that you do know. So if we can consolidate that, we can improve your score. But in saying that, you are welcome to contact the Institute of Medical Education for a free consult, for a free and confidential consult regarding your recent score. If you'd like to know how to proceed, how to apply for med school in 2023 for 2024, you're welcome to contact us, or you can come see us in person. We're here in the Gold Coast. There was some developing news actually that came out yesterday. So ASA has just released via their website that GAMSAT results are now valid in Australia for 4 years. It used to be 2. That's very significant. So it's specifically in Australia though, not necessarily UK and Ireland at the moment. ASA says there's some developments there, but at the moment it's just for Australia. That means that your GAMSAT scores are now backdated from September 2019, and you can use your GAMSAT score from September 2019 onwards to apply for a medical degree in 2023 for a 2024 start. So this is fresh news. It only came out yesterday. For those watching, please note that if you sat the GAMSAT a few years ago, you got a good score, but you thought you couldn't use it anymore. If it's from September 2019, you can use it now. So keep that in mind. I think it's a fantastic initiative from ASA because now it's more equitable, the GAMSAT, and a lot of you guys have, a lot of you guys now don't have to spend, I think it's at the moment $500 to $600 Australian dollars every single sitting. Now that if you get a good score, you can use it for the next 4 years. So keep that in mind. And for those of you who've just heard this news, if you do want to talk to us again for a free consult, just contact us and we'll have to have a chat. So today's session, so it is webinar number 4. We're going to move away from the hardcore physics, math, and chemistry we went through in the past. If you do watch our previous videos through our website or YouTube, only because I want to ease you guys back into some tasteful topics, only because it is university exams just finished, GAMSAT just finished, it's holiday mode. We're here in the Gold Coast. I live near I guess Surfers Paradise where all the schoolies are. I get it, everyone's having fun. So I don't want to obviously I guess I don't want to put you through more dread. So because I know some of you might be seeing the GAMSAT for the first time next year. And just finally, as a reminder, yes, these webinars are recorded. You will receive a link to this session and previous sessions because you're on the mailing list. You'll probably receive the link next week, or you can just find us on YouTube. So if you like, you could go on our website, imemedical.com, or search Institute of Medical Education on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. pre-IME for Instagram, at IME Medical for TikTok, lots of fun TikToks. So to give you a lot of free education. So we understand that because of COVID, because of rising inflation, interest rates, a lot of students can't afford GAMSAT material anymore. So we're offering these free programs and free courses for you guys because we know how hard it is for students these days. So we're trying to give you as much as we can. So if you go on our YouTube, we've got free material for ACER, solutions to ACER exams, solutions to our own questions. So you've got an encyclopedia of free material on our website as well. We've got a Section 2 essay generator, a free exam. Please jump on our website, go for your life with all the free material. If you feel as though you need a bit more, we do have programs you can enroll in, and we can have a chat about that after. But for free material, go on our website, go on our socials, you'll find everything you need. Or you can come visit us in person here in the Gold Coast, in Benoa, and we can have a chat. So enough of that, let's get into today's session. So the agenda for today. So generally these sessions, I try to aim for about an hour, but it depends on how we interact today. It could either go for an hour, maybe an hour and a half, but we try to aim for an hour. If you can't stay for the whole time, that's fine. It is recorded and you can always watch it at your own leisure. So today, we're going to look at a Section 1 short passage analysis, just to give you an idea of how we can accurately look at these passages and extract as much information as we can. And finally, we're going to look at some metabolism and thermoregulation for a Section 3 graph. I decided to give you a straightforward graph today, just to give you an idea of how to read a lot of information and trying to analyze a graph based on a large block of text, which GAMSAT loves to give you guys. And finally, we can address your questions if you have any. If you do have a question, you can raise your hand. Otherwise, just post it in the chat or just unmute yourself and ask. It is a webinar. We're trying to promote you guys to be interactive. It's kind of like a group session so that we can all benefit from today's session. So do we have any questions before we move on to our first section, Section 1? Okay, cool. So short passage analysis. So the way it's going to work today is what I will do is I'll give you, so you've got your extract here. So it says here the extract below from letters to the editor of the newspaper. So I literally just went onto the Washington Post. I found a couple of passages regarding letters to the editor about, I think, marijuana laws in the United States and the push for decriminalization or legalization of marijuana. And I've got two passages here regarding the issue. So what we're going to do is we're going to have, I think, 4 questions, but I've got a poll up and I'll give you, so in the GAMSAT you get, so I think it's 62 questions for the first section and you get, how many minutes is it now? Sorry, I just forgot it. They might change it for next year, but it averages out to about 1:35 per question for Section 1. And for Section 3, it's about 2 minutes per question. So what I'll do is I'll give you 2 minutes for the first question, just to give you a bit of a chance to read the passage as well. And then for question 2, 3, 4, I'll give you 1:30 each. So what I'll do is I'll give you, so 2 minutes, 1:30, so it's 3, plus another 1:30 is 3:30, so 4:30 plus 5. So I'll give you 5:30 for the 4 questions. Then my math, did I do my math correctly? So 1 minute, 3 minutes. Oh, sorry, 6 minutes 30. So I'll give you 6 minutes 30 for the 4 questions. But I'll give you 2 minutes for the first one, then every minute and a half I'll change it. So I've got the poll. I'll start the poll. And then what we'll do is once you get your answers, we'll come back together and we'll open the floor to see how you went and we'll discuss. So I'll just launch the poll. So the poll has been launched. What I'll do is I'll give you, again, 6.5 minutes. So 2 minutes for the first one and then 1.5 minutes each. I'll just grab a timer. Oh, 1 sec. I just have to grab a timer. Just give me 1 second. I'll just be back in a second. Okay, guys. So your 2 minutes for the first question starts now. So please try to put in your answers as well. And if you do have any questions, you can post them through the chat box and just raise them now if you do. Okay, guys, we have 15 seconds left on this question before we move on to the next question. So you have 1.5 minutes for this question. But I guess you do have the poll available to you if you want to jump the gun and read the other questions as well for those playing along live. Another 1.30 minutes for this one. Okay, guys, last question. We have a minute and a half, last question. We have 30 seconds left, guys. Try to finalize your answers. We've got one candidate with their answers. By the way, your answers are confidential. I can't see who answered what. So I don't know who's answered what. So don't worry if you feel as though I'll be picking on you. I won't. I have no idea who's voted. So we've got 5 more seconds. I think we're waiting for one more person to vote. And time stops now. Pens down, hands down. Great. Okay, so what we'll do is go back to the start. Okay, let's have a look at your answers. Okay, great. We have a nice mix of answers. I love that, because usually if we have a great mix of answers, it means we're going to have we're going to have some great class discussion. So would anybody like to just open the floor, I guess, and tell me what they think, just to summarize each passage? So from the viewpoint of passage 1 and passage 2, would anyone like to tell me what their view is of what the viewpoint is from each passage? The floor is open. You can unmute yourself and let me know, or let the group know. So would anyone like to tell me, what is passage 1 and passage 2? Do they both have the same thought process, the same rationale for decriminalization, legalization of marijuana, or are they different? Well, in the poll here. Okay, so let's look at passage 1 first. So passage 1, well, firstly, actually, how do you read these sort of passages in the GAMSAT if something like this pops up? So if something like this pops up in the GAMSAT and you're just like, oh my God, there is so much text. How do I look at this and answer all these questions in such a short amount of time? I mean, that's one of the skills for section 1 of the GAMSAT. I think one tip you can use, I mean, everybody's different. If you're comfortable reading, you may read the whole text. Otherwise, just use the question as context first. If you read the first question and understand the context here, it can help you with the passages, understanding the passages. The good thing is the passages here are written in plain modern English, so it shouldn't be that hard to understand what they're saying, especially since they're letters to the editor. It's most likely someone from the general public, so it'll be easy to understand their language, I guess. So if we take a look at the first passage, we see that the first passage, this author of the first passage is pretty much saying that they know cannabis is bad. They're not denying the fact that cannabis is bad, but I guess the facts don't lie. Regulation is safer than criminalizing the drug. So you can see that clearly. They say here, to be clear at the top, the push for decriminalization and regulating cannabis means curbing the illicit market, mandating dispensaries, checking identification, and working with law enforcement. So it's a good thing. But the issue is they're also saying that decriminalization of marijuana doesn't mean it's harmless. That's far from it. We know it's harmless. But the thing is that if you're making these assumptions that youth use of drugs will increase if you legalize weed, that's not fact. They're giving you evidence here that recent audits show that regulated cannabis industry shows near perfect compliance. So it's trying to tell you that legalizing cannabis, the data says that it doesn't make people smoke more. If anything, it hasn't changed. It just, what it's done is it's made it less, removing that stigma, making people become criminals because they're smoking marijuana. We know there's bad things happening, but smoking it means it doesn't mean you should be a criminal. Whereas passage 2, so does anyone want to tell me what passage 2 then is about? Is it the same as passage 1, the same thought process? Does anyone want to tell me what they think passage 2 is trying to, what their viewpoint is? If you have, I'll give you a hint. Passage 2 is definitely, the author of passage 2, it definitely disagrees with passage 1. Let's put it that way. So what passage 2 is trying to say is that it starts off the same, that yes, we know cannabis is bad. We both know cannabis is bad. And but the thing here is that let's just tell you that, well, cannabis is bad, and it also has negative health implications on young kids, which means we have to criminalize the drug. Now, it kind of leads into one of the questions as to the way that each author argues their points. Clearly, passage 1, in my opinion, argues it with more sound evidence, whereas passage 2 is more, I mean, it does use evidence, but it has an agenda. They both have an agenda, but passage 2 definitely has a very specific agenda, which we'll go through in a second. Now, the first question says the speaker in each passage. A, agree that cannabis should be decriminalized. B, agree that marijuana is harmful. C, disagree that marijuana is harmful to youths. And D, are indifferent on the negative effects of marijuana. The good thing is I can say that all of you are correct. Those participating in the poll, the answer is B. So both passage 1 and passage 2, they both do agree that marijuana is harmful. However, passage 1 is clear that regulation of the drug is far better than criminalizing those who smoke marijuana, whereas passage 2 is that marijuana is bad and therefore we should criminalize the drug because it causes negative health implications. So they both understand marijuana is bad, but they just have different reasonings for why it should be criminalized or decriminalized. So in the GAMSAT, if you were to see a question like this, generally with section 1, because I always get from students and candidates, how do I, section 1 is like, it's notorious for being impossible to study for. I mean, there is some element of truth. However, with section 1, there is a way you can always give yourself a chance to score well. And the best advice I can give is narrow every single option down to 50-50. So what you can do is you can always, there's always going to be 2 options there that are just obviously incorrect. So if you look here, option A says that cannabis should be decriminalized. If you read both passages, you can see that pretty much passage 1 is only pushing this. So A, if I get my pen out. So A is definitely incorrect because only passage 1 is agreeing with this. So we know B is correct, but let's say C. So C says disagree that marijuana is harmful to youth. That's incorrect. So obviously B and C are opposites of each other. So one of them is going to be correct. C is obviously incorrect. And D says are indifferent on the negative effects of marijuana. That is not true. They definitely have very frank and outspoken views on marijuana, which is why D is incorrect. But honestly, if you were in the GAMSAT, you probably would have narrowed it down to B and C. And then it would have just been a quick, take a look at the passage and then straight away be like, okay, try to find something, because I know in the GAMSAT it is a rush. Try to find something that gives you the reason, okay, it's either harmful or it's not harmful. They both think either one is true. The good thing here is that they both kind of explain at the beginning that they understand it's harmful. So you would have straight away, if you just read the first couple of lines, just went straight to B. So keep that in mind for section 1 question. So if we move on to question 2, by the way, if anybody has any questions about any of the questions presented in stimuli, you can always post in the chat box or just unmute yourself and let us know. So this is an open floor, it's a webinar, so we can have a chat with each other. It's not a traditional lecture where the boring lecturer just keeps talking. If you want to have a chat, you can definitely chime in. So it's a very relaxed environment here, so you don't have to worry. No one knows who you are. You're pretty much anonymous. It's kind of like me talking to myself then. If there's 3 people in the chat, it's like I must be talking to pretty much 3 of my own personalities, let's put it that way. So question 2, it says a red herring is a misleading statement meant to redirect the conversation away from its original topic. Which passage best incorporates this rhetorical device? Now, interestingly, we had a few options from you guys, and it looks like those who participated, before I tell you who's got the right answer or the wrong answer, could you please, if you'd like to join in, give me your rationale for your answer? So welcome to the member who just joined. We're currently just going through answers for section 1. And sorry you couldn't make it for the first half. Don't worry, we still have questions for section 3, which we haven't gone through. So it's okay. If you'd like to participate, you can probably read the passage and let us know soon. But for those who did participate in the poll, would you like to tell me what your rationale is? Why did you pick passage 1 or passage 2 or neither passages or both passages? I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. So let's go through the passage 2. Sorry, let's go through, I guess, a definition of a red herring. So a red herring, it says here, it is a misleading statement. It's something supposed to redirect your conversation away from the original topic. So if we think about it, let's take a look at passage 1. So passage 1 says, to be clear, the push for decriminalization and regulating cannabis means curbing the illicit market, mandating dispensaries to check XYZ. And according to the author, the narrative regarding decriminalization is that marijuana is harmless, but that's not true. To be honest, there is no red herring here, because they started off by saying that we understand that we need to curb the illicit substance market, but at the same time, we need to address the issues here, which are that making marijuana legal is a problem. And to be honest, it's not necessarily a red herring. If you look at passage 2 says no one wants to see anyone's life ruined by the law because they're using marijuana. So they're talking about the law of marijuana, and all of a sudden now they move into ruin can occur, however, through marijuana's mental health effects. So they kind of went from this idea that they're introducing laws regarding marijuana as damaging, but then they proceed to discuss harmful effects of cannabis on mental health. So can you see how they're going with the argument of, yeah, the laws are bad, but you know what, drugs are worse. So they're kind of trying to divert your attention from the law, and they're just pushing it towards the problem of mental health. Whereas you can see passage 1's a bit consistent. They're sticking to their guns about decriminalization, the rules and the law and the guidelines against the legalization or decriminalization. They're not trying to sway your thinking. They're not trying to get you to decide on anything else. They're just telling you that the law says that if we legalize cannabis, we're not going to have a problem with people using it or the youth using it. Whereas the passage 2 is just straight up saying at the beginning, no one wants to see their life ruined by law, but the laws for marijuana. However, did you know that marijuana is bad for you because it destroys your brain? They went from the law to mental health. So they're trying to shift the focus away from the actual laws. So technically it is a red herring, because they're trying to shift your attention away from the original topic, which is the law of marijuana. So they're trying, it's kind of like politics. This is like, in my opinion, because this was from the Washington Post, I'm assuming this is obviously American contributors from the United States. It's a typical political tactic that a lot of the major parties in the United States use. It's like, well, look at this over here, but how about, it's like, look at that pony over there, but you know what? There's a nice Ferrari over there, you know? So they're trying to divert your attention from the big problem by trying to tell you, well, there's something else worse, to rally up their force or to rally up their the constituents. So that's why the answer is actually passage B. So not passage A or neither passage. It's a very subtle, it's very subtle. It's in the first two sentences. And now these are the sorts of questions that trick up everybody in section 1, because it really does come down to the subtleties of reading the passages. And for any tips and tricks for those wondering, oh my God, how the hell do I get this correct in the future? Again, this question required you to read the subtleties. So it comes with practice. So if you practice reading texts and reading the nuances of text, the best advice I can give is every time you read now a newspaper or an article online, try to read every sentence and actively approach, okay, so what are they doing with this sentence? Every sentence serves a purpose. So try to understand what the rationale is behind each of their arguments. So actively approach what they're trying to reason. That's the best way. It comes with practice. It's not going to happen overnight. The good thing is you've got time until the March GAMSAT to practice that. But this is the sort of things you can do to help improve your section 1 score. This one, if this was a GAMSAT question, it would definitely have it'd be a tricky one for a lot of people, mainly because it just requires understanding of the context and the nuance of the argument, and it comes with practice of reading opinionated pieces. But if you do have a question regarding this question, you can post it in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and let us know. But for question 3, or if you're playing along at home, you can comment on I think on the YouTube page or wherever this is posted in the future. So question 3 says, according to passage 1, the regulation of cannabis has, and it looks like we've got with you guys as well, we've got a mixed bag. Thanks for attending, Kushani. I hope you can watch the recording soon. But to those, again, if you can't make it, stay for long, you can watch the recording after. And thanks for your kind words. Now, for question 3, guys, according to passage 1, it says the regulation of cannabis has. So we did have a mixed bag for you guys. The answer for number 3 is D. Now we'll go through why the answer is D. Does anybody want to explain to me the rationale for their answer? Because I know somebody got it correctly. A couple of you guys were close. Could you explain to me why you went with your option or why you didn't go with your option? Okay, that's all right. So with this question, if we take a look at all options available, it says that first one, according to passage 1, the regulation of cannabis has increased the use of marijuana amongst youth. Now, your eyes are going to be fixated here because we're looking at passage 1. Now, we know 1 is incorrect straight off the bat, and you all correctly noted that it was not correct because no one answered that, because it clearly says here that compliance with an increase. So it clearly says here, recent audits have shown that there's a near compliance without increase. So, therefore, there is no increase. So that's wrong. A is wrong. B says had no effect on the mental health of youths. Now, B, I mean, mental health, if you were thinking about passage 2, I mean, they are using some form of evidence passage 2, but passage 1, we're not talking about the mental health of the youths here. We're talking about criminalization and usage and increase of usage with the youths. So B is technically a red herring, if you want to put it that way. It has no sense. It makes no sense to passage 1. C says made marijuana more accessible to youths. Now, if you read the passage, it says here that there was perfect compliance without an increase in cannabis use among youths. So it pretty much says that they're arguing here that the use will rise after cannabis, but that's not true. You can see here in this sentence beforehand, the rise in use of cannabis hasn't actually increased. It stayed the same. So even though it's become more accessible to youths, it hasn't had a change on the use of marijuana among youths. So that's why C is incorrect, because according to the passage, the regulation of cannabis technically has had no change of the use. It's implied, obviously it's made it accessible to youths, but the secret term here is more. Technically, it hasn't made it more accessible to youths. It's just made it accessible to youths, but there hasn't been a change on the use of marijuana among youths. So that's very important to note. So again, it's subtleties in the question. When you're under pressure, it's just trying to knock it down. However, in the GAMSAT, you would have kind of knocked it down to these two. And the good thing is a lot of you guys who played along were close. But just notice the subtleties here. If you read the last two sentences, it's saying that even though we've made it legal, marijuana now is accessible to youths. It's not necessarily more accessible, it's just accessible to youths, but there hasn't been a change on the use. So that's the important argument that passage one's trying to make. Again, it's a subtlety that comes with making sure that you read it just carefully. But don't worry, obviously in this environment, I'll put you under pressure. I've definitely thrown you guys under the bus, but it's great to see that you're within the ballpark, which is good. So does anybody have a question on this one before we go into the last option? Okay, cool. So the last option, we've got in contrast to the first paragraph. So we're looking at passage 2, second paragraph. Passage 2, second paragraph employs which type of evidence? Now we've got a mixed bag again. I won't give the answer, but straight away, does anybody want to walk us through what their option was? Okay, so let's look at passage 2, paragraph 1. So passage 2, paragraph 1 says it is pretty much using where is it here? No one wants to see the life ruined by laws. Ruin can occur. I've witnessed in my extended community. So you can see clearly that paragraph 1 of passage 2 is anecdotal. So you can see that that's anecdotal. Actually, I'll just do that for a second. But we're not asking for passage 1. We're asking for passage 2. So it's paragraph 2 of passage 2. So it says here, hundreds of peer-reviewed mental review studies have been conducted, and it's using not everyone will be harmed, but the most vulnerable users are teens and young adults. So you can see here they're kind of using evidence with authority. So it's not an analogy. So you know straight away that, okay, it's not anecdotal. There's no anecdote here. They're actually giving you information for peer-reviewed articles. So it's not anecdotal. It's not analogical because there's no analogy being made. It's giving you actual facts. You're left with statistical and testimonial, which you guys actually did have as well. So it was one or the other. Now, with either one, this is where the confusion comes in. So if it was statistical, they'd be using numbers. Now, the problem is this is where you get thrown off. It says here hundreds of peer-reviewed mental health studies. That's not stats regarding the actual findings. That's just telling you hundreds of reviewed studies have been used. So that's why it throws you off. Whereas then they go through telling you that they've used peer-reviewed studies. So a testimonial is pretty much using authority of peer-reviewed studies to prove a point. So that's what a testimonial means, using, let's say, for example, a president of a country to say information. It gives it more body, it gives it more power because somebody in power is telling you this information. Same thing here. The peer-reviewed studies are the powerful source of information it's giving you and providing you with this information. So technically speaking, passage 2, paragraph 2 is using testimonial evidence, not statistical, because this is what throws people off. So hundreds of peer-reviewed mental health studies is just telling you that we've got this many studies. If it said that it's been conducted on marijuana containing THC with, and they showed the harmful effects, 65% of teens in this age group had psychosis, and 30% had debilitating lives, XYZ, that's statistical evidence. Whereas if you're talking about just straight using a peer-reviewed evidence to show your argument has body, that's the key. And you can tell just by analyzing now, if you analyze both these passages, so this is what you should be doing when you're preparing for GAMSAT. I will go back to passage 1 and say, well, passage 1 is actually using testimonial evidence. So keep that in mind. So this is why if you were to read both passages, you're probably thinking to yourself, look, they're both passages, but passage 1 sounds more well-rounded. It sounds more academic. It sounds more powerful. Why does it? Because if you read both paragraphs, they're using testimonial evidence for both. Whereas passage 2, it starts off with testimonial, but then it just goes into, it starts off with anecdotal, and then it goes into testimonial. So it starts off weak. If you were to analyze this, you can see, if you're starting off an argument with something that's anecdotal, it just sounds like it's a weak argument. It's kind of like something for your section 2 essays. If you're going to write an essay, you don't want to start off with anecdotal evidence. Start off with the hard facts. Hard facts, bring in the reinforce with the hard facts, and then you can bring in anecdotal evidence as an aside. But you don't want to start off with anecdotal, because it makes your argument sound not as strong as they could be. So that's one thing you can do when you're reading these passages, these opinionated pieces. You can see just by reading the thought process of the commenter. So you can keep that in mind. Now, before we move on now to section 3 question, and we finish off on this topic, does anybody have any questions or any comments or passing comments that you'd like cleared up? Anything you'd like with section 1 that you probably need help with? Anything you'd like to point out you've had a problem with in studying? Anything else? So you can post in the chat box, or you can just unmute yourself and let us know. I'll give you another couple of seconds just in case. And we will have a time at the end as well to open the floor for questions. So with, just to, I guess, finish off the section 1 stuff, I have said it in the previous videos. The best way to prepare for section 1 is I would develop your own, let's say, encyclopedia. Have like a PDF file, a Word file, Excel spreadsheet, with like a massive table with different themes, different topics, and different types of writings, whether they be opinionated pieces, whether it's a scientific abstract, whether it's a long passage, short passage, a poem, a musical piece, a song, all these sorts of stuff. Have them in a folder. Analyze each one, have the different themes of each, whether it's love, war, money, sex, crime, XYZ, have them in there, have different metaphorical techniques, and try to do that if you can. Thanks for your message there, Mr. Anonymous. It's great for your kind words, and hopefully you can catch the recording after. So for those of you still around and watching, just make sure you understand that if you do generate this file with all this information for you, it's like an encyclopedia for you. You'd have all the themes, you'd have all the poetic devices, you'd have all the definitions, so that you can draw from it from your brain. Section 1 doesn't have to be difficult to prepare for if you use the right techniques. So I'll keep it at that, and we'll move on to now the last section here, section 3, metabolism and thermoregulation. So what I've got here is a graph, massive block of text with a lot of definitions. So you'll notice in GAMSAT section 3, they love to give you questions like this, where it's a block of text with a graph. And to be honest, in isolation, if you look at this without even time constraints, you'll probably be like, oh, this is straightforward, whatever. But because you're under such time constraint and you have to read all these new definitions you probably haven't heard before, it makes it that much more difficult. So what I'll do is I'll give you guys a second, or those of you playing along at home, you can just pause this screen and have a read and then go on to the next question. So this page, and you can pause this screen to answer. But for those playing along here, what I'll do is I'll just send in the chat. Oh, 1 second. Let me just copy this and send it to you in the chat. Just 1 second. I'll just grab it out. Oh, well, let me copy it into the chat. What I can do then is, how about so how about I just give you guys about so you guys playing along today, I'll give you about 2 minutes to have a read of this. Just take note of the terms. And then for those playing along, if you want, you can pause the screen and go back to those questions. But for those of you right now, I'll give you 2 minutes to have a read and then we can answer the questions after. So what I'll do is I'll give you 2 minutes, and then for each other question, I'll give you 2 minutes. So, so I'll give you 6 minutes on the other page. So I'll give you 2 minutes here and then 6 minutes to answer these. But I'm just trying to figure out why it won't let me paste into the chat this text. Or if you are playing along at home, probably just if you're playing along right now, screenshot this page and just have the screenshot ready for the next page. So I'll give you 2 minutes. So just have a read here, and then we'll go into the next page, and then you have 6 minutes to answer. But for those just playing along now, you can screenshot the page and use it. Sorry, it just won't let me paste the text into the chat box. So I'll just give you 2 minutes starting now. And if you do have any questions, you can post them through. So to those of you playing along right now, I have made accessible the poll. So you can probably have a read of the poll with the current text, just to give you an idea of how the questions relate to the text. But when I go to the next page, you'll have 6 minutes. You still have another minute on this page. Okay, guys, I'm going to move over to the next page. Please make sure you've screenshotted this page. If you haven't, just let me know and I can go back to it. So you've got 6 minutes to answer these 3 questions. So you should be on to question 2 by now. We've got 2 more minutes, so should finishing up your final questions and we'll go through your answers. So 1 more minute. Hopefully you can put your answers in within the last minute and we can see how you do. Alrighty, we've got about 10 seconds left, but we might as well wrap it up there. And excellent news. All the answers we have, or all the options or answers to the options we have provided, A, B, A, are correct. So what we can do then is, since you must be an expert, could you please explain to me your rationale for the answer? I'll open the floor to you. So, oh, I've got my video up as well. So let me know what your why you chose those options. You can either chat or let me know through text. I mean, what you're going to say is correct because all your options were correct. Well, how about we start off with what the figure is telling us? I mean, with this sort of question in the GAMSAT, I think it's important to note that it's purposely broad to throw you off. ASA loves questions where they give you a lot of information where, I mean, it's pretty much a standard GAMSAT question. You have to actively decide what's the important information. When you look at the graph, you know that we're going to have to try to decide whether A, B, or C is either a poikilothermic, a homeothermic, or a heterotherm, which is in between the two. So based on the definitions we read on the previous page, I mean, the first question asks, which of the following relationships would you expect to be represented by a homeothermic, a homeothermic organism? So it's going to be A, B. So one of them is homeothermic, one of them is poikilothermic, and the other one's heterotherm. So you've said correctly that it is A. And the reason why A is homeothermic is there, would you like to explain to me why? Or maybe it's on the other page, actually. So the definition of a homeotherm. So if we look, the definition of a homeotherm is organism whose internal temperature remains stable over a vast range of external temperatures. You can see here, its internal temperature is not changing over a massive change in environmental temperature. When we look at the figure here, just make sure you analyze the graphs carefully. It's telling you the TE, which is operative environmental temperature, which is just the temperature, outside temperature, and body temperature is internal temperature. And you can see here, the body internal temperature here is not changing across the different external temperatures. So we know that that represents a homeotherm. So therefore, question 1 has to be A. Now, question 2, it says, which of the following organisms is likely to demonstrate a thermoregulatory mechanism demonstrated by relationship C? So we know, therefore, that from B or C, so C is either going to be a poikilothermic or a homeotherm. And obviously, just by doing your research, you can tell that it's got to be a poikilotherm because we know that a heterotherm is somewhere in between a poikilotherm and a homeotherm. So we'll just say this is a P, this is a homeo, so homeo. Just going to make sure I write this correctly. Homeo, and this is a hetero. So just by looking at the graph, and you can see here it's telling you that the optimum temperature for both a homeotherm and a poikilotherm is equal to the external environmental temperature for these organisms. But for question 2, it's saying which of the following is likely to demonstrate a thermoregulatory mechanism demonstrated by relationship C. So we know that C, the body temperature increases with external temperature. If we go, well, it increases linearly. If we go to our text that we had on the previous slide, it says here clearly that poikilotherms are organisms like fish and reptiles which experience an internal temperature which varies directly with the external environment. So, you know, therefore, we have to pick an animal from this option. It's either a reptile or a fish. An ostrich is a bird. Last time I checked, they had feathers. A salmon is a fish. That's why salmon is correct. A fruit bat is a fruit bat. It's definitely not a fish or a reptile, or a mammal, if you want to call it that. It is a mammal. Wait, bats are mammals. Just gotta double check. My science is fading. Is a bat a mammal? Yes, bats are mammals. Just gotta make sure I say the correct thing on camera. And field mouse, obviously a small little mouse, is not a reptile or a fish. So that's why the answer is B. So this question requires you, like most GAMSAT questions, to look at the graph, go back to the text and read the right information in the text. And in this case, you've got it correct. Lastly, this question is meant to throw people off. So this question says, which of the following is false regarding optimum temperature? Now we've got A, B, C, D. So when it says false, it means that pretty much most of these are going to either be true and only one of them has to be false. So this is actually a pretty easy question if you're thinking about it, because you're like, I don't have to do much because they've already told me what the right answer is. So if we take a look, well, the answer is A, but let's just take a look at all the options here. Let's just ignore A for a second. It says B. apoikinothermic organisms are able to establish optimum internal temperature. Is that true or false? Well, that is true. Any organism can establish optimum internal temperature. I mean, any organism has the capacity to. However, not all organisms can achieve it. But to answer it, is it false? This statement, no, it's actually true. So, I mean, is the statement false? No, it's actually true, which means it's an incorrect option. So try to wrap your head around this, because this is what gets people in the GAMSAT. It's trying to wrap your head around what they mean, the way they word the question. So it is a true statement, but it's not a false statement, which means it's incorrect for this option. C says heterotherm. So remember, heterotherm is in between. Tend to exceed the thermal optimal temperature for a given external temperature. You can see here, a homeotherm and a poikilotherm, they actually reach optimal temperature at the operative environmental temperature. So they definitely can. So whereas heterotherms, it's a bit higher. You can see it's just a bit higher. So therefore, this option is a true statement, and therefore it's not false, which means it's an incorrect option. Finally, none of the above. Well, this is determinant on this option here. So if this option is incorrect, the answer is D. If this option is false, then the answer is A. So if we take a look, it says for an organism to establish optimum internal temperature, it must have the capacity for internal heat production. Now, that is false, because it doesn't have to be a endotherm, because I think, so you can see that ectotherms, they rely on environmental sources, but ectotherms can actually reach optimum temperature, internal temperature. It's possible. So it's not just endotherms, ectotherms can, and the reason for this is because all organisms, they can reach optimum internal temperature. That's the purpose of thermoregulation. That's the whole point. If we weren't able to reach this, then we just won't be efficient enough, and they just probably wouldn't exist. So that's why you can argue that this is false, because for an organism to establish optimum internal temperature, it can have the capacity for internal heat production and external influence. So that would make it a correct statement, but it's missing this statement. So that's why A is a false statement, which means it's correct. So D is going to be incorrect. So that's why A is correct. Well done to those playing along, because you got all the options correct. Now, this sort of question, if it comes in the GAMSAT, it just requires you to make sure under pressure, you can read the text, the full-blown text, and you can analyze the graph. Now, if you're looking for obviously more complex analysis of graphs, we have given some in the past of previous recordings. And our next webinar, which is going to be on the 15th of December, our final one for the year, I've prepared a very interesting physics graph. I mean, it's a straightforward graph, but the concepts you're going to learn is going to be something you probably haven't encountered before. So hopefully you can stick around for that in the next couple of weeks as well. Before I move on to our final, just our discussion, is there any questions you'd like to point out? Anything you'd like to say before we finish off with this section 3 topic? Anything you'd like to post in the chat or you'd like to talk about? And if you do have questions, if you're playing along at home or if you're watching online, you can post it in the comment section, whether it be YouTube or wherever it's going to be recorded or, sorry, uploaded in the future. Okay, cool. So that was just a nice session to get you guys back into it after the September GAMSAT. Remember, I know you've probably just finished your GAMSAT exams, your university exams. It's getting to the point now where you're in the mood to just relax, chill, have a party. Try to make sure that you do rest up and you do give yourself a break. But just to have a question here, thanks, Kimia, before I go back onto that. One question for preparing section 1, what to include in the table? So that's a very good question. So if you want to prepare for section 1, in your actual table for your study, I would have different topics. So let's say the different topics you can get for section 1 are Again, poems. So have a topic, poems. And you can have probably a subtopic for poems. You can have poems about different themes: love, drugs, sex, crime, fear, fantasy. Or you can have poems specifically about different contexts in time. Contemporary poems, old school Shakespeare poems, poems from the Renaissance. So you can have something like that. The more categorized it gets, the better. But these are the 1% you have to do. So that's specifically poems. Let's say you do passages. We're going to do short passages. So you can include in short passages an opinion piece. You can include autobiography. You can include an abstract. You can include scientific abstract. You can include anything, and then just have in there different poetic devices analyzing these analyzing these passages. You can have different definitions. Another one you can do in the table is a good one, actually. So this helps you for section 2 as well. Another one you can do is world political structures. This is something that a lot of students struggle on. I notice this a lot. A lot of people they're influenced, their knowledge of political structures in the world is influenced by the media. And the media tells you a summary of a political structure of a country that pretty much bastardizes the actual political structure. 2022 is not 1999 anymore. It's not 2010 anymore. Political structures change all the time. Make sure you understand there is more than just socialism and capitalism in the world. There's democratic socialism. There's variations of capitalistic socialism. There's obviously fascism. There's obviously, not many people know that there were fascist organizations in Australia. I think in the 30s, when New South Wales, when they were trying to get a new premier, they had a massive problem. I remember the guy's name, Jack or something. But there was fascism in Australia. It's not just fascism in Italy or the Nazis and stuff. So these are the sorts of things you want to have, an encyclopedia of that as well. Also, section 1, don't forget, you might get questions on looking at data and trying to interpret data, which we'll look at in the next session. So on our final webinar, December 15th, that's a Thursday, we'll go through a section 1 question that looks at data specifically. How to interpret how to interpret imagery. So that's a big one as well. Have a file for imagery, have different images, have different types of, when I say poetic devices, I mean stuff like, what's the difference between a simile and a metaphor? What's the difference between a what do they call it? A oxymoron and a diacope or whatever it is, right? So there's so many. The reason why my head's going all around in circles is because there's like so many. As long as you write them down, you've got it. Start somewhere. If you like and you're stuck, again, you can contact us at the Institute of Medical Education. We can give you a free consult. We can help you out. Obviously our programs can help you out as well, and courses can help you out. But in that sense, just start there. If you feel as though you need more with your preparation, when you do some practice ACER exams, you'll see the kind of questions you're going to get. And that way you can build more topics, and that way you can put more through. But again, if you're having trouble, you can contact us, and we can obviously have a confidential chat with you regarding how to move forward. And as I was saying earlier as well, look, it is a time for relaxing. Please look after yourself, look after your health. I know GAMSAT can be very consuming. The whole process can be very consuming. If you do need help, please seek help, please seek advice. This is the time of the year where there's a lot of problems in mental health, especially with males and male suicide. It is November. So please, if you need to talk to somebody, reach out, don't keep it to yourself. It is a stressful period. But in saying that, please look after your health. And we will have our final webinar on the 15th of December. So again, that's a Thursday. You can access all of these recordings on our YouTube. I'll send you guys a link soon to those on the mailing list so you can access it straight away. But otherwise, please look after yourself and look forward to the new year ahead. If you have any questions, please let me know now. Otherwise, post them in the comments, or we can end the session. I'll give you a couple of seconds and then for any final questions, and then we can probably end on that note. Any more questions there, Kimia? Or anybody else? Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic weekend, everyone. It was great seeing you all, and we'll see each other soon. Thanks. Bye now.